Hello and welcome. Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to 60 minutes of a presentation, but also looking forward to your questions and bringing you some topics to you about digitalization, disruptions, and how corporates can win in this whole situation of a lot of disruption by a lot of startups. A bit about myself, as you introduced myself as an entrepreneur, that's true. I started my own businesses around 20 years ago, all around platforms and marketplaces, but not knowing about that. I haven't known about marketplaces at this time. I just made it and built it. And after some years, around 10 years later, I read some books around platforms, marketplaces, and then I figured out and realized, oh, this is exactly what you have built, a multi-sided business, a marketplace. That's amazing. But how can we build more of that? Because there's an immense power and immense potential behind those platforms and marketplaces, how they orchestrate markets, how they shape markets, and so on. So I started to think about how can we really build more of that. And this was also the time where I started to build my own methodology. The Platform Innovation Kit is a bit like a business model canvas for the platform economy, and started to bring this to the world, which is also now used by millions of startups, business schools, and corporates around the world. Some years ago, I also founded my own company, fastbreak.one, which is a corporate venture builder, and we are working very closely with those traditional companies, with those incumbent companies, and help them to make the leap into the new digital world, but not just by automating processes. It's more by looking into how can I shape and change my business model to be more ready for the future. And this is exactly what I will also talk about in this speech. I will share a bit of insights, what is happening around us, what kind of disruption is going through our markets. And second, what we observed, how corporates are tackling this kind of disruption by implementing digital transformation programs, and what is maybe going wrong with those programs. And then in the third part, I will talk about how can you do it better? How can corporates win in this game? Because I strongly believe those corporates, they have the right assets, they have the right situation, which could lead them to into a better position compared to any kind of other startups out there. But let's start first with the platform revolution we see out there on the market. Maybe you have witnessed, but in the last 15 years, the life expectancy rate or life expectancy span of corporates shrinked massively. So around 1955, the average lifespan of a company was about 75 years. Nowadays, in 2015, the average lifespan was around 15 years. So you see, those bigger corporates, those bigger traditional companies, they face a huge threat according to their lifespan, because there's a lot of disruption happening in the market. And one reason for that is that some new kind of businesses, some new kids come to town. And those are the startups, also so-called unicorns, with a valuation of more than $1 billion. And they are grabbing market shares at a rapid speed. They also receive a lot of funding, a lot of investment from a lot of investment companies around there because of their business model, because the investor sees the business model and how those startups act is much more, has a higher potential, instead of investing into those traditional companies with all their assets, with all of their experience, with all of their processes. So you see, those new startups, they attract a lot of money, and this gives them a huge potential to invest this kind of money into going to market, shaping new products, maybe with AI, maybe with other leading edge technologies. And when we look at a timeline, how long it takes for those startups to become a unicorn, then also this time is going down and down over the years. Some years ago, Uber became a unicorn. Not sure what's happening over the when we look at Uber some years ago, then for Uber it took around 4.5 years to become a unicorn. But when you look at other companies like Jet, WeWork, and so on, it took for them, or Airbnb, which is maybe more well known to you, it took for them 2 years or less to become a unicorn. So you see there's also a lot of money in the market, and the investors totally understand this kind of business models, and there's a kind of a fight among those business investors to go and seek for those business models and invest. What is also happening in the world is that exactly those kind of startups which are acting like a platform business are disrupting those markets. And what are platforms? Just to be clear, platforms, when we talk about platforms, we're not talking about technology platforms. A technology platform could be something like what we heard before with AI. You can use it, you can leverage it, you can maybe componize it, and you can build some different kind of product out of that. The same is also what we have seen in the automotive industry. Maybe you build a technology platform, and based on the technology platform, you can create different kind of cars. It's much more efficient. But when we talk about platforms, we mean multi-sided businesses. Multi-sided businesses like Airbnb, eBay, all of those kind of marketplaces where you have on one side the demand side, you have on the other side the supply side. You match them, you bring them together, a multi-sided business. And you as an owner of the marketplace, or you as the owner of the platform, you become more like an orchestrator. You're orchestrating between supply and demand. So you don't need to invest into assets like factories, but you have to invest into building up those stronger networks where you can facilitate the matchmaking and the transactions. And this is exactly what we see also in the market when you look at different kind of industries. Without the platforms, or before the platforms, you had a standard value chain in the market. Some kind of raw material supplier supplied it to the production companies, to the service companies, and they had a direct access to the consumer. But after a while, the platforms came into the game, and they put themselves in between the consumers and the producer companies. And what is the impact of that? A lot of consumers now go straight into a platform like Amazon and order the goods there or the services there. And so there's no need for them because it's very convenient for them to go straight to the producer side. And this means for the traditional companies, they lose customer contact. A lot of customer data, especially digital data, goes straight into the platforms, and they can learn what is the behavior of the customer, what do they want. They can start making predictions for that. Like Amazon said, okay, I can kind of read by my artificial intelligence what you will buy next, and kind of already put it into our warehouses so that I can ensure there's a same-day delivery proposition. What we also see is a huge impact to the business case of those traditional companies, because when you have a new player joining a value chain, then the value of this value chain is distributed by more players. And a consumer maybe spends €100 for a product, but the margin is now divided into 3 parts and 3 players. And guess what? The player who has a directly access to the consumer always gets the biggest share of this margin. So this means also that the traditional companies upstream the value chain, they face lower margins. And as a third fact, it creates higher dependencies and risks, because now you have to face not only to improve your own marketing channels and sales channels, but now you have to deal with different other channels via marketplaces and platforms. So you need to deal with that, and you become more dependent on how you are positioned on those marketplaces, how you are positioned according to your competitors. And so it's creating a lot of more risk for those traditional companies. And especially this kind of platforms is for us a huge indicator of a new inflection point of business model domination. So when you take some steps back and you look at the history of maybe the last 150, 200 years of how we on our planet do business, then we saw the rise of the mass customization or the mass production 100 years ago. This led to the dominance of product companies. So those product companies, they could create, because of mass production opportunities, a lot of products for a low price, for a cheap price, and can push them to the market. After some years, they figured out, oh, it's not only enough to have nice products and push them to the market. We also need to further differentiate to the competitors. So they started to understand, okay, we need to create more and more services around my product. So it started became a new inflection point in the market of service companies and service business models. And especially in the digital economy around 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we have seen the rise of the platforms like I said, eBay, Amazon, etc. So they started to push themselves to the market, and those was born a new kind of inflection point of platforms. And what we see now is also, maybe you have heard about it, an inflection point of ecosystems or super platforms. Those are kind of platforms who are starting to bundle multiple platforms and multiple services under one umbrella. So we see also this, especially in Asia, that it's not just enough to be a platform, but also to further expand your dominance in the market by, incorporating more and more services around that. And we created this chart not only to visualize what are the different business models and their dominance, but we also wanted to visualize that the time between each inflection point is lowering. And this means, again, it puts a lot of pressure for companies to innovate. So you don't have time anymore to go into a journey of 10 years, 5 years to build a new product and push this to the market. Nowadays, you have only less than 1 year. And this is also referring back to my chart when we talked about the time it takes for startups to become a unicorn. Platforms very often also display this kind of winner-takes-all dynamic. So it's not enough just to play and create a marketplace, and creating a marketplace in the market is kind of an easy and simple and maybe also a cheap way to create a new business, but you have to face high competition among marketplaces. So what is important for those marketplaces and platforms is that they start creating those network effects. Network effects means the more users and the more producers, so the more supply and demand you attract to your platform, the stronger the network of people become, and therefore you attract more and more users also from the market, and it creates also a kind of a defensibility against the competition because more and more users are now on your platform. A simple case are social networks. Here in Germany, we had two major business social networks. One was Xing, born in Germany, and the other one is LinkedIn. I'm sure you all know about LinkedIn. And then the user could decide, should I open up a profile in Xing? Should I open up a profile in LinkedIn? They could not really decide, so they opened up a profile in both networks. And over the time, people realized, okay, I can do a bit more with LinkedIn. More people are on LinkedIn. More international people are on LinkedIn. So why should I also, play with two networks? So they forgot about their old profile in Xing, and now everybody, almost 99% of social networking, business social networking, is happening in LinkedIn, and the other network, you can forget about it. And this is exactly this kind of winner-takes-all dynamic a platform wants to create. And this is also what the investors are looking for, because this is the potential of a platform. I can become the ultimate winner in a market, and based on the network effects, creating huge defensibility, strengths against the competition. And when you look at the investments in the last 23 years, then 70% of the value created in tech went into those platform businesses based on strong network effects. So, and then also Slack, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all of those things, all those big brands you have in your mind, they are all based on network effects. So what about the digital masters? So when you look at digital company or big role players in our market like Apple, Microsoft, etc. So what is about them? Are they platforms companies, or what exactly are those companies? To have a better understanding what those companies are, we need to first understand the different business models and how different business models create different types of capital valuations and return on investments. So when you're an investor and you want to have a look at a different model, business model, and you want to understand how this generates a return on investment for your investment, then they put in some kind of valuation factors or multiple factors. And those classical physical companies, as you can see, they have maybe an ROI of around 7%. So of course, a lot of investors invest in them. They say this is a stable business model. It will be there for the next years, so I can invest. But the return on investment is very small. They are more interested into business models and capital types with a higher return on investment and valuation factor, like intellectual capital, which is what you see in the software business or biotech, etc., based on AI, but also based on coding, software, and so on. So they think, okay, when you write a code, when you write a specific program or software, you can copy it infinitely by a cost of zero. And you can start creating new kind of business models around, like subscription model and so on. And this is also creating recurring revenues, not only just a one selling opportunity like a car. I create a car, I sell a car one time, and maybe I have something in the aftermarket. But with the software, I create software as a service. I create subscriptions models, and I have recurring revenues month by month coming in. And this is something investors really, really like, and therefore they invest a lot in those intellectual capitals. But what they also more like is this relational capital, what you see in platforms. Relational because you have a relationship between supply and demand, and you build those transactions, matchmaking, etc. And you can always get a kind of a transaction cut. So it's not just getting some revenue per month on a recurring base. It's more like I get all the time on each transaction a share of that, maybe 5%, 10%, 15% for each transaction which is happening. And this is even more attractive for those investors. So when you now look at the digital masters like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and so on, and compare them to those traditional companies, you need to understand, okay, the portfolio of how they create money is always split into those different capital types. And when you look at Apple, the majority of the revenue of Apple comes from still physical products. So Apple, iPhone, MacBook, etc. So it's the same like building a car. But what they also added to their portfolio is a huge portion of intellectual and relational capital or business models. And when you look at those traditional companies like in automotive, then they're far behind. And that's why those digital masters like Apple and Co. are more advanced in and more attracting, also have a higher valuation in the market compared to those traditional companies. So what you need to understand is it's now not about transforming my whole business as a company into a platform business. It's more like finding the right mix of capital types within the portfolio of my company. Coming to the second part of my keynote here and talking about what is currently happening at incumbent companies, at those traditional companies. And when we talk to them, what we see is a lot of digital transformation programs. And digital transformation means they are digitalizing all areas of the corporations. When you imagine your corporate like a house, then you have at the top your company strategy. On the left-hand side, it's the pillar of customer experience. So all the activities to do marketing, sales, services, etc., everything which has a touch point with the customer. In the middle, you have a pillar about products and services, so the core of your company. And on the right-hand side, you have the pillar about business processes, so all the finance stuff, financial things, supply chain, and so on. So all the processes you can further standardize and automate. And you have at the base, you have the capabilities of your company, like the people, the foundation. Without people, you cannot run your company. It's talent, it's the understanding, it's the expertise. So what we see at the moment is that digital or incumbent companies, they created a digital transformation program and strategy. And so they have worked on all of those pillars. And what we also see is that they fail at the most important area by creating new businesses. So they have a perfect written down corporate strategy and digital strategy, maybe by support by some very smart consultants. They also went into the customer experience field by creating shops, apps, service touch points with chatbots, etc. So they automated a lot about the customer experience, the customer journeys. They also went into a lot of improvement programs to digitalize business processes, doing maybe into implementing a lot of automation. You are the experts for that. And they also went into the trainings and capability enhancements, working with the people, transforming them into an agile organization, giving them trainings on digitalizations, etc. But what we really see is that those traditional companies, they have a hard time in really implementing new businesses. But they are trying. They are investing a lot into those digital innovation programs like incubators and accelerators. So they try to aim for outside innovation. So they understand, if I don't have the right talent inside of my company, or I cannot really bring new ideas to life, then maybe I should look for outside innovation. So maybe I should work together with startups and attract them into a kind of an incubator accelerator program and support them. And there's a good analysis here by a consulting company, and they looked at how are accelerators and incubator programs applied in different industries. And as you can see in the chart, in each kind of industry you can find them. So there's no industry without any kind of accelerator incubator program, which is a good signal that the corporates understand we have to innovate, we have to push forward, but we cannot solve it by ourselves. So maybe we can look for outside innovation. But also, when you look closer at those programs and you ask yourself how much very good examples, how much really successful cases come out of those programs, then it's almost zero. So those programs are also now entitled by Innovation Theater. And what does it mean? Innovation Theater, it looks brilliant. So you have nice rooms, you have a nice group of people. You do also generate a lot of nice people with a lot of sticky notes. It looks very, very nice. Also, the executives can go out and say, hey, please come to our nice looking rooms. Here are our innovation teams. They work very, very hard. But when you ask them, bottom line, what is really the outcome? Can you give me some really successful cases where the accelerator program was a success and really went from an idea into a highly scalable business? Then almost nobody can tell you a case. So there's really an execution gap between generating ideas and creating a really highly scalable business. This means also for the incumbent companies, they are not stupid. They know about that. They understand, okay, if my accelerator program is not really working and I invested a lot of money into that, what else should I do? So it results into acquisition strategies. So they understand the pressure in the market, they feel the pressure in the market, and that they have to hurry up with the innovation. And therefore they say, if I cannot incorporate a startup, if I cannot work with them together, if I cannot create an idea, so maybe I need to acquire a startup, which is maybe, it seems like a fast way to success. But this is also what these startups know. The startups understand, the corporates, they are in a bad position. So they are now willing to invest into a lot of money, and this increases the price rapidly. So what we have seen, that a lot of big corporates buying a lot of those startups for a very, very, very high price. It's nice for the startups, but is it good for the corporates? We have also seen that a lot of those mergers and acquisitions of startups also fail because it's a clash of culture. So the corporate tries to incorporate this startup and put it into the core set of the existing company. That, okay, now I have the technology, now I have maybe a business model, let's incorporate this, and now we can become winners. But there's a clash of culture. So the startup works in a different way. So they don't want to be part of this huge corporation corsets with their processes and so on. So after some years, most of them fail and the integration fails. There are only 20 or 30% of them which are really successful integrated into the company. So it seems it's not really a very good idea to also do all the mergers and acquisitions for a really, really high price. So based on all that experience we had in the last years and what we have seen and witnessed in the market, we said this couldn't be the solution. This couldn't be the solution. It could not be that the traditional companies fall apart and die, and there are always the startups who win. There should be something in between. And so we think when we closer look at what is the advantage of those corporates, we think the corporates, they have assets to be the startups at their own game. Because what is a startup looking for? A startup looks for funding, looks for resources, looks for access to customers, and so on. So they look exactly for those kind of assets a corporate has. A corporate has immense of resources, a lot of people, they have a lot of funding, they have tons of cash, and they have also a big customer base. So they have everything what is required to build something new. And but of course, it needs a kind of a reframing towards this kind of startup mentality to find and act like a startup. And that's exactly where this new field of corporate venture building comes into the game. Corporate venture building it's a matter of combining the best of both worlds. On the one hand side, you have the corporates with their, we call it unfair advantages, as mentioned, funding, resources, network, customers, etc. And on the other side, you have the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs in a startup, they have this hunger, this willingness to search for new businesses. They have this agility. They also work highly efficient because they have limited resources. They all have this kind of entrepreneurial kind of instinct and mentality to find really go into a testing mode and validation mode, try to find out a really highly scalable business model. And they have, of course, this understanding of how those new business models really work. So corporate venture building is by bringing corporates and entrepreneurs closer together and create new startups together. Where is this corporate venture building on the corporate venturing landscape? As mentioned before, you as a traditional company, you have multiple options how you want to innovate. You can do accelerators, incubators, etc. But how does it relate to corporate venture building? And as you can see in this chart, corporate venture building is really covering all of those phases. It goes from 0 to scale up. So it's not just a tool or a framework you can use for this recovery phase or the startup phase, launch phase, or for the scale up phase. It's really covering everything. So in a typical way with corporate venture building, you go from generating ideas until a scale up phase within 2 years. How does it work exactly? First of all, you create blended teams of venture studio entrepreneurs and corporate entrepreneurs. So those entrepreneurs from a studio, from a venture studio, they are experienced founders, they are experienced innovators, and they know what it takes to create new businesses because they have done it before. They know what went good, what went wrong. So they know about the tools and so on. They have also this kind of trained mentality. And on the other side, you have those corporate entrepreneurs. Corporate entrepreneurs are people inside of a corporate into a traditional companies, which also have this hunger for doing innovation, looking for something new, creating maybe their own business. But they like the corporate environment, and maybe they have also some years of corporate experience. So they know a lot about these corporates, those assets, the market, and so on. And now they can but they don't want to start their own company outside of a corporate. They feel kind of linked to the corporate because it's a safe environment. But if you can bring those entrepreneurs together with some real external entrepreneurs, this could form a highly successful team, because both bring their advantages on the table. The second major thing for corporate venture building is that you create the startup outside of the corporate governance. So all the time, after you generated an idea and you validated the idea, then you form a new company, a new legal entity. So why is this important? First, for incentivation. So the how to incentivize people is not only by money, but also giving them shares in the company. A real entrepreneur, a real founder, he wants to own some shares of his company. He said, if I invest more than the 40 hours per week, if I invest maybe 100 hours a week working on the startup to become really, really successful, then I also want to participate on the success of the startup. So I want to get some shares. And if you give them some shares, you cannot give them some shares being part of a department or being part of a bigger company. So maybe you can give them some stock options, but these stock options are not really like having shares in your own company. So first, creating this company outside is important for the right incentivation mechanism for the founders and the founding team, and also for the venture studio. The second is, and it's also very, very important, to give them the freedom to act. Why is this important? Imagine if you create a startup within the corporate, then maybe you have to play according to those corporate processes. You're experts on automation. So you created a lot of business processes for procurement, but also for IT development, etc. So if you say, I'm a startup and I want to develop a new platform and I want to do this together with the IT department, then the IT department tells you, oh, we have other projects as well, so please put in your requirements. I will work on that. Then they come back to you after 2 months and you say, oh, the requirements changed. We don't need this feature anymore. We need something else. Then you say, oh, why I worked for that? And you go on and go on and go on. And it takes a while to create a new software, because a lot of those requirements will change over the time. The same is also for maybe using some different tools, some new tools. You want to try out some new tools. But then you have to go to the procurement department. I want to try out this new tool. Okay, now we have to do an RFP process to request different proposals from different vendors to compare and so on. So you're caught in those kind of governance processes of the corporate, and takes you a while and creates a lot of frustration. So that's why it's important to give them startup an own legal entity and the freedom to act, creating their own business processes around the business model and their activities. And the third very, very important ingredient here is that you should definitely leveraging the corporate assets. As mentioned before, that's why we call it unfair advantages, because this corporate has a lot of assets, and the startup team understands, okay, if our idea of a startup is maybe requires some technology, right? Requires to reach out to some customer base, requires maybe a strong mother brand or something else. So you can discuss, you can go on, explore what kind of assets of those corporates I could leverage and I can utilize to bring my startup further. So definitely this kind of exploration of assets it's mandatory. This kind of model of this corporate venture building is provided to those traditional companies by so-called venture studios. And this kind of innovation model has arrived in the last years. So when you look at this chart, there's the presence of those venture studios around the world exponentially increased. So it started around the years of digitalization around 2000 with some around the world. But nowadays we count maybe over 560 of those studios around the globe in different locations with different specializations. And what is the advantage? Can we really see the clear advantage, and can we measure it? And there's a white paper out there comparing and the performance of studio startups versus traditional startups. And as you can see here, it accelerates the speed to growth for those startups. So it's reducing the time from to Series A to less than 3 years. Why is this important? Because you launch the company and you put it in the market, you start getting some feedback, you get you maybe understand, okay, what is working, what is not working, and then you can say you can clearly and better articulate to your investors, could be a board, could be external investors, what is working, what not, and why you need some more resources to push this forward. And you do this much faster because you work together with very experienced entrepreneurs. They know the tools, they know the methodologies, they know how to do that. They have maybe also some assets to reuse, to build platforms and marketplaces, etc. So you're much faster to market compared to those traditional startups of people who are doing it the first time. And also, based on another study, it shows clearly that those startups coming from those venture studios have a 30% higher success rate compared to those traditional companies. So 30% higher success rate doesn't really sound high, but if you put yourself into the shoes of an investor, it's massive. An investor, when he invests into startups, the typical success rate is around 5 to 7%. So he needs to invest into, or maybe turn it into another words. 1 out of 10 investments is really going through the roof and saves the rest of the portfolio. All the other ones will develop mediocre or will fail. So 1 out of 10 needs to save the investments for all of the remaining and other investments. And if you can increase the success rate from, let's say, 5% to 30%, this is immense win for investors. And also, if you can increase the chances to go from 0 to Series A to 70%, it's also an immense win for those investors because they understand, okay, it's a really high likelihood that what they build will go on and go on and go on and become really a huge successful business model after Series A. And we see a very positive trend out there. There's a study by McKinsey, and they analyze or they ask CEOs around the world what priority is business building for them. What is the strategic priority for them? And when you look in the time frame of 2017, 2019, around 30% of them said, this is a top priority for me. But when you look 2 years back, 2020 to 2021, then this increased. And then half of all of the CEOs said, business building is our top priority for our company. And this is for me a clear signal that this is now changing a bit of the mindset, and it's also starting to change the digital transformation programs as we have seen before. Before digital transformation, as told you, more working on business processes, customer experience, but not really working at the core of creating new businesses. But now, with setting a high strategic priority on business building, we also see that those digital transformation programs are changing. And it is leading to better results, as shown before, but also based on the same study. And it shows that if you do business building more than 1 time, do it 2 times, 3 times, and even more than 5 times, it creates your innovation muscle. So you become stronger and stronger and better at building those businesses. And this is leading then also to higher return on investments. If I do 2 startups, 3 startups, 5 startups, I'm becoming more keen to what is really required, how does it work, and I become more successful. And with that kind of plaidoyer, I would like to end my note here and say, if you really want to create some change, then stop watching it from the sidelines. Please go into the game, be on the court, have the boldness to create some new businesses and to work together with entrepreneurs and work on new business models like platforms or ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. A lot of interesting stuff, and this has also sparked discussion and questions here. So let's dive into that. Here we go. What should I study to be part of digital transformation after my studies as a student? What do you recommend? What kind of things to focus on, especially?
Very good questions. We see a lot of good and great entrepreneurs coming from different kind of studies. So when you could study business, you could study technology. It doesn't matter. Important is that you have the right mindset and the willingness to become an entrepreneur and to go into this adventure, and having also this mindset and the boldness to risk, and being an entrepreneur instead of looking for a safe job in a traditional company. It's nothing wrong about looking for a safe job. So people have to hear about their inner voice and say, okay, what kind of type of human I am? Is it more like I want to have a safe environment? Totally fine. I can become a developer. I become a finance guy. I become whatever into a traditional company. Or if I feel more this kind of nature to go into this adventure. And this is, I think, something you need to try to explore, listen to yourself, maybe ask some friends, ask your family, try to better understand what type of people or human you are, what inspires you, what motivates you. And based on that, when you feel that, then go out, explore. Maybe you should join some studios, some venture studios, to become part of those initiatives, to see from other entrepreneurs how they do that. You could also join some accelerator incubator programs to understand what kind of tools they use, so to become more involved into those digital innovation things. But at the end, you should have the hunger for entrepreneurship. You should have the hunger for new digital technologies, and you should try to understand business models like platforms, ecosystems, how they work, what they are, what is this business mechanics behind.
So talking about business models, that also sparked interest. What is a next business model that will dominate? Any tips for students for good business ideas?
Yeah, we still see that the platform business model is dominating and is further increasing its dominance. It's also important now for climate change. When you look at circular economy things, then also platforms are a perfect business model. What does it mean? As mentioned before, a platform is always like an orchestrator. You want to orchestrate between supply and demand. So you have on the one hand side the buyers, on the other one the suppliers, and maybe some partners you want to connect and interact with each other and find each other and so on. And when you look into the future, what we need is also more circular economy. So means like how can I further not just produce a product, bring it to the market and forget about it, but also what about the waste? What about the end of life of those products? Can I circle it back? Or if I have a manufacturing line and I have some byproduct, some waste out of this, how can I circle it back into the whole loop? And for that loop, you need even further orchestration, and therefore you need also platforms to help you to orchestrate everything. And another one we see is also the Web3 environment. In the Web3, more like decentralization, you have even further players you want to connect without any kind of middleman, or you want to maybe remove the middleman. But at the end, it's like a self-organizing platform where everybody wants to exchange with everybody, and more like a peer-to-peer network. And therefore, you also need a platform which helps you to facilitate all of those transactions. And therefore, I would strongly recommend have a closer look at the platform business models. Try to understand them very well, because you can leverage it in all kind of those new areas we see.
There is an interesting question about corporate venture building regarding some real-life successful examples. I used to work, for instance, for Nokia Ventures organizations, NVO, many years ago, and it was a lot of tough work, and I was nodding when I was listening to you. So what kind of real-life successful examples of corporate venture building could you be presenting for us to look at?
Yeah, one of a good example is Zenfood, for example. Zenfood is a B2B platform built together with those major retail chains. So when you have food, or what is the platform concept behind, is you bring food startups with nice new food products or drinks, bars or whatever, and they want to enter the market, for example, here in Germany, but the market is highly fragmented. So you have a lot of retail stores, and if you want to bring your product to the market, you cannot go to the major chains like Rewe, Aldi, and so on. You have to go to the store owners because they make the decision what kind of product should be displayed and sold in their store. It's not by the central organization, it's really decentralized. And therefore, if you have 10,000 or more of those stores, you as a startup, you need to contact each of them to sell this. On the other side, also the store owners, they want to have those new fancy things because they understand, hey, this is something new. I can sell it for a higher price compared to the traditional product. So they are looking for those, very nice food startups and food startup products, but they don't know about them. So Zenfood enables both to find each other, but also doing the transaction, doing the logistics of bringing those products to the market, to the stores, doing refill, etc. And this was a very successful case, working together of a studio and entrepreneurs together with those major retail chains, because they said, okay, I cannot invent this or build this by myself. I need to have some more entrepreneurs, and this is at the moment, going through the roof. Hyperscaling, and is becoming very successful.
As I mentioned, lots of questions and comments here. So let's pick one more, because I think it'll be interesting for everyone to hear. Regarding the development of platforms during the next, let's say, 5 years, where should we focus as Europeans? Thoughts, tips to leave all the listeners with?
2 answers to that. In the short term, we should more focus on B2B platforms. In the B2C world, where you really have the end customer, I think there are a lot of platforms already out there in the market. But in the B2B world, this is kind of the early days. We see a lot of B2B platforms already, but a lot of those industries has just started to embrace this business model. So there's room for a lot of more of those B2B platforms, and B2B platforms are also a bit different compared to B2C because the products are much complex, the transaction costs are much higher, and you can always combine them with a lot of software components. So a hybrid model of platforms and software as a service is hugely common in the B2B world. So and we in Europe, we have a strong proposition in engineering, manufacturing, and so on. So we definitely should have a look at B2B platforms, and maybe then also based on those things we build in Europe, we could maybe transfer it also to America, Asia, Africa, and somewhere else to further expand also the footprint of the platform. So this is the first answer. Have a deeper look into B2B platforms and become a strong, or maybe the leader in B2B platforms. And second is Web3. I think also Web3 is massively led nowadays by technology questions, legal questions. So we learn a lot in the last years. We will learn in the next years. And with the metaverse ahead of us, if you look at how Web3 business model could work, what is working, what is not working, there's also a huge potential here, because you will not stop that the metaverse will come. It will be there in the next years. We cannot stop it, but we can shape it. We can make it. We can work on what kind of metaverse we want to live in. We can shape how it will look like, how it will act, and therefore understanding the mechanics behind is really, really important.
Vielen Dank Thank you very, very much, Matthias. A lot more to discuss, but to be continued, obviously.